Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Today I'm going to be showing you a little summary document, well actually a really big summary document from the Biden administration on the Broadband Infrastructure Bill, or actually the full infrastructure bill with part of it being broadband, but I think that'll be helpful, so I'll be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Broadband Deployment News. So, when these huge bills pass, you read through them and they're just a mess as far as trying to understand everything that's in there. And a lot of times there's a lot of stuff that's not been fleshed out. And sometimes they say you got to pass the bill before you know what's in the bill, and then you read it after it's passed, and it's still hard to figure out. So I found this document that I thought would be helpful. It's from the Biden administration here. So you see here, it's a guidebook to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. That's what they seem to be referring to it now as. It's the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, but they're calling it the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And it's for state, local, tribal, and territorial governments and other partners that are stakeholders in this. So it's from the White House. Table of contents. So you can see, this is a huge $1 trillion bill with a portion of it being broadband. So you can see in this bill, we forget sometimes if we're in the broadband business, everything else that's in here, but we've got roads, bridges, and major projects, passenger freight rail, public transportation, airports, public and waterways, safety, electric vehicles, etc. Then there's climate and energy stuff, other programs, and then right here we've got broadband starting on page 385. So again, this is a huge document. But I thought it was a good summary to have access to. So I'll go ahead and in the comments link to this document so you can look at it yourself. I thought I'd go through it just a few places here just to explain a few things if that would be helpful. So I'm just going to click. Actually, I need to go over here and click. Nope, I wasn't in the right spot. Hold on here. Should be able to, well, it worked earlier. Oh my goodness, why is that? Before, I'm not sure why, before when I clicked on this, it took me right where I wanted to go. So I'm going to have to scroll down now to 385, page 385 to find that real quick. Where are we? 306. Almost there. Where are we? 334. You can see how long this thing is. And I highlighted it, so it'll show up here. Here we go. All right, so here we are, broadband. Takes me to the broadband section. I think that's, yeah. Orphan dwelling plugging. So this is right here, broadband. Some remarks by President Biden when he was talking about this not long before he signed it. Again, there's kind of a summary here, preamble kind of info. So the challenge, so what is it? Ensure all Americans have access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet service. So affordable, important in this bill. Reliable, obviously, and high speed are all aspects of what they want to be providing here, and they're trying to focus on all of those things. They say by one definition, this is one definition, more than 30 million Americans live in areas where there's no broadband infrastructure that provides minimally accepted speeds. We have no idea if that's right. They say it's one definition. We don't know. It could be more, it could be less, and certainly every day or week that goes by, it's less because we've got 5G that's expanding out there very quickly, and that's in a lot of cases, wireless now can do, with 5G and mid-band spectrum, can do over 100 megabits per second. We've got satellite broadband. I don't know if they'll count that. They probably won't count that from the perspective of where it shows up on the maps, but a lot of people now are getting over 100 megabits per second via satellite broadband through low Earth orbit satellites from SpaceX's Starlink service. You've got lots of providers out there that are putting fiber in the ground as quickly as they can using existing money. This money won't be available until, at best, probably early 2023, but you've got ARPA funds out there, USDA Reconnect, you got RDOF funds being released, so lots of that money is going right into the ground right now in fiber. So those that are not covered is getting smaller every day or month, right? So these numbers will be going down, but we really don't know because the broadband maps are not accurate, so we have no idea. You can see here that this I mentioned here, it's a particular problem in rural communities throughout the country, and this is where we do have the issue primarily. Things like affordability can affect all different areas, but as far as where there's really no broadband, it tends to be in rural areas because there's not enough customers to make it economically viable for a service provider. So if they only have just a few customers, in a really big area, it's not going to pay for them to get broadband infrastructure out to those customers. So that's what this program or these programs are designed to do. You've got those kinds of areas where there's not many customers, or you've got areas where maybe there's a good number of customers, but it's just really hard to reach them. They're all on a mountain somewhere or something like that. So again, we're trying to address all of those situations here. It says according to the latest organization with an S, so this organization that is putting this together must be somewhere in the UK, maybe Canada. Did I spell it that way up there? I'm not sure. So according to the latest Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development data, among 35 countries studied, the U.S. has the second highest broadband costs. Okay, we'll take that at face value. I know it is higher here for a lot of different reasons. One is a lot of times there's one private provider, okay, maybe so there's not competition, maybe keeping the prices down. But also, we've just got expansive areas. So again, the costs are a little bit higher here than they might be. If you average it out, then they might be, let's say, in a country where you've got a lot of people consolidated. It's a very small country and not a lot of rural areas and lots of larger cities comparatively in those countries. So there are different reasons for that. And in some cases, in other countries, the government subsidizes everything, and that could be good or bad depending on how they're doing it. Solutions. Bipartisan Infrastructure Law invests roughly $65 billion to help ensure that every American has access to reliable high-speed internet. The legislation will also help lower prices for internet service. So they're trying, as they do this, to lower the prices. Now, part of that is just through a direct subsidy that goes to the internet service provider for those that are, qualified for low-income funds. But they're also trying to get prices down in other ways through competition. So in the first parts of the money that's going to be distributed through this program, competition's not going to be the focus, because they're really going to be looking for areas where there's nobody, or at least there's a provider there, but they're not providing service that would qualify as served. But then later, all bets are off. So once those unserved and underserved areas are taken care of, and then all the anchor institutions are taken care of, that's the next step. Then competitively, they can start providing service in areas that are even served at that point, and to try to bring prices down. So that's just something to be looking forward to, so to speak, or looking ahead to, not looking forward to if you're a broadband service provider already in the business. Funding overview here. This funding falls into 7 major program areas. So the $65 billion, we hear a lot about the Bead Program, which is $42.45 billion right there, but it's $65 billion total. So you do have $42.45 billion in Bead, that's broadband equity access and deployment. Then there's the Affordable Connectivity Program, $14.2 billion. That's taking the place of the EBB, I can't remember that, but that's basically the EBB was passed under the coronavirus legislation that took place that was helping people that had lost their jobs, and then couldn't afford broadband. So that was that particular program, and the ACP takes over for that. Rural broadband programs at the Department of Agriculture, $2 billion. Middle Mile Program, $1 billion, and then some private activity bonds, $600 million. I'm not even aware of what that is. And then it mentions here January 7th that the NTIA issued or released a notice seeking comment on these programs, the different programs that the NTIA is over. And they've now closed that period. That closed in early February, and they've gotten 500 plus comments from various people, from just consumers, everyday consumers out there, to service providers, to associations and lobbyists and others that have commented on that. Each state, including DC and Puerto Rico, will receive at least $100 million, so that's the minimum amount that will be distributed once that can be distributed. And then you've got some territories, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Marianas, that in the U.S. Virgin Islands, that will each receive $100 million split between them, so it'll be $25 million. The remainder of the funds will be allocated based on a formula that considers the number of locations in each state or territory unserved by broadband and the number of high-cost unserved locations. So you've got a real variance there as far as, a state like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts versus, let's say, Alaska, versus maybe Texas. So you've got different areas. You've got Montana. You've got areas where there's fewer people in a larger area, especially something like Alaska, and then you've got areas where there's going to be less high-cost areas because maybe the territory is not that hard to serve, and you've got fewer rural areas. So all of that's going to be put into a formula that's going to determine how much money everyone gets. But everyone gets $100 million kind of as a minimum to start out with. And then 5% of that, when they get that $100 million, 5% of that right away. So even before the broadband maps are released, every state will get $5 million for their planning. So that then they can do pre-planning to try to get everything in place with their broadband offices that they already haven't done, maybe beef up hiring, that kind of thing. Then you see, this is kind of a quick summary of the different programs, but there's a page for each that I'm going to go through here in a minute. So getting ready, so it tells kind of the entities here what they should be doing. So for BEAD, I mentioned states should identify and solidify their state broadband leadership teams and begin coordinating across state agencies and with tribal and local governments and other stakeholders to begin to develop a strategy and plan for identifying and meeting the state's broadband deployment, affordability, and equity challenges. So they need to be doing this now because it's going to take a while before the notice of funding opportunity comes out. They're saying they're shooting for the mid-May timeframe. I heard one of the people in the NTIA came out and said it may not be till mid-June because I guess there's a lot to do. So that's a possibility that they might not hit that mid-May target. It may take another 30 days or so. And once that happens, then basically the state has to come back and say, yeah, we want to participate, and pretty much everybody's going to say that, right? But then the state's got to get in their plan. They've got to prove that they talk to all of these stakeholders. So there's a lot they could be doing now before they get that notice of funding opportunity, and they should be in the middle of that. The Affordable Connectivity Program, again, that's the 14.2 billion or so, and they're saying there state, tribal, and local leaders, internet service providers, and nonprofits should identify opportunities to effectively reach out to low-income households and inform them about the program. A big part of what they want to make sure happens is that consumers are aware, if they qualify, that they're aware they can sign up for this. And that's part of that process. The Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. Tribal leaders should identify and solidify their broadband planning, deployment, and affordability programs, and plan to participate in tribal consultations and national telecommunications and information administration webinars and other information sessions. So the NTIA is going to try to provide a lot of educational information for the various eligible entities, including tribal organizations. So more information will be coming out about that. There are some webinars that are scheduled. You can't yet register for them. As soon as you can register for them, I'll pop in here in a quick live broadcast and point you to that website. Right now there's a list of them, but there's not a way to register for those. And they'll be covering a lot of these particular things. The Broadband Reconnect Program, rural companies, government officials, and residents interested in bringing better broadband to your community should go to participate in RUS webinars, Rural Utility Service. And the RUS Reconnect program has been around for a long time. It's just that additional money was provided through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And they've talked about existing resources here. These, again, are resources that are available now where funds are being issued right now from prior legislation. So, again, a lot of people are already putting fiber in the ground from these programs. So you've got ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, that was $350 billion. And there's still, I think they're still accepting applications for that. Broadband deployment projects and digital connectivity projects are eligible uses for funding for the $10 billion capital projects program. So that's another $10 billion there. Broadband Reconnect program, again, that's the Department of Agriculture, the RUS. So they're still accepting applications through tomorrow. So if you haven't gotten it in, it might be kind of late now, but that's for $1.15 billion in grants and loans for broadband deployment in rural areas. But that's the existing program. Again, there's more money going into the IIJA, where they put in more that has those are not yet ready, those applications to be taken. So, and then you can see here again, $65 billion. So you can see where is it all going, and then there's just a quick table here that's showing it. So again, you got BEAD, the $42.45 billion. You got the ACP, the $14.2 billion. Your tribal, kind of hard to see here. Hold on. Get over there. Tribal broadband, about $2 billion, and then you get some of these other competitive grants and digital equity stuff. Middle mile grants is $1 billion, and some other things here that are smaller amounts. So that totals up to approximately $65 billion, 64.4 right there. And then here's again a quick page on each as you go through these. So you got your Bead Program, again, $42.45 billion. Used for broadband planning, deployment, and adoption projects. Each state will receive initial funding of $5 million. That's their planning grant that I mentioned. That's 5% of the $100 million that they're going to get initially, or their minimum that they're going to get. And each territory will receive an initial funding of $1.125 million to support broadband planning efforts, including building capacity in state broadband offices and outreach and coordination with local communities. So that's going to help them try to outreach, hire people in their office and then try to reach all the stakeholders so that they can then properly plan, and then they have to present that plan back to the NTIA, including proving that they did have all these conversations with these various stakeholders. Leveraging those initial planning funds, each state and territory will submit a 5-year action plan, which will be informed by collaboration with local and regional entities. The remaining funding will be distributed based on a formula that considers a number of unserved and high-cost locations in the state, as I mentioned, based on the maps to be published by the FCC in 2022. The FCC has said so far that they're expecting that in the summer and the kind of maybe June time frame. So maybe the notice of funding opportunity, maybe they're saying, well, we might as well wait till June. We have time to get that right because the maps won't be out until June. We'll have to see. But again, the NOFO, the sooner they get that out, the better, because that's going to really tell the eligible entities like the states and others really what they need to be doing. So we'll have to see. These maps, again, they have to be in place, and the whole point of this is that we need to know who's unserved and underserved, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Once the maps are out there, there's going to be a lot of back and forth. There's going to be a lot of challenges. There's challenges based on areas that are already served. There's going to be challenges based on areas that are in the process of being deployed, as well as those that are not yet started, but there are dollars already applied to that particular census tract or census block. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth on that. First priority, unserved locations, and when they say unserved, they mean those below 25 by 3, followed by underserved locations, which would be those that are below 100 by 20, and then serving community anchor institutions, and they want to get those up to 1 gig synchronous up and down. And as I mentioned, after that, I think there's going to be money left, and after that, the NTIA is going to be looking to see how they can improve competition in areas. So if there are areas that are, there's only one provider and it looks like prices are too high, they could certainly provide money to others that might want to overbuild that area. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But again, that's last in line according to this. Eligible uses for that, planning, but then also broadband infrastructure deployment and to promote broadband adoption. And it's been said by the Secretary of the NTIA that, even in a state like Alaska, where they've got lots of middle mile that needs to be done, they could take some of this BEAD money and apply that to middle mile. There's only $1 billion for middle mile, and Alaska is going to need a good portion of their dollars to go to that, so they could even apply it to things like that. Again, the next largest amount here is the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program. And this would be subsidies. These are provided directly to the ISP to apply to consumers' monthly internet bills. So the consumer needs to apply to the ACP, and they can apply based on certain criteria as far as being considered low income. It could be whether they're in a school lunch program, whether they're getting food stamps. There's different programs that would apply. And then the service provider also needs to apply to say that, yes, we want to be able to provide for this ACP or this Affordable Connectivity Program. And then the end users can get $30 a month benefit on towards their monthly bill, or $75 if they're on a tribal land, they're a tribal household that's also low income. They can get up to $100 to purchase a laptop, desktop, or tablet, as long as they contribute somewhere between $10 and $50, and it's limited to 1 monthly service discount and 1 device discount per household for the ACP. And then we've got Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. This is adding to a program that was already in place. So they get another $2 billion here. This is providing grants for broadband infrastructure deployment, affordable broadband programs, distance learning, telehealth, digital inclusion efforts, you can see here. Again, it's mentioning it was initially authorized by the Consolidation Appropriations Act of 2021, so this is adding another $2 billion to the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. Eligible uses, planning, mentions feasibility studies, for example, broadband infrastructure deployment, such as construction, Broadband adoption, digital literacy, tech support, digital skills training. Again, devices and equipment here. So estimated application opening date for that is to be determined. So again, there's already money that was allocated. Way more was submitted. A lot more applications were submitted than was available in the original tribal broadband funds that were available through the Consolidated Appropriations Act. So there's $2 billion more that's coming on that. Distance learning, telemedicine, and broadband program. This is part of Reconnect, USDA Reconnect, 1.9, almost $2 billion there. Recipients, you can see all the different recipients. It's going to be, tend to be, again, this is rural, areas that are rural. Description, Reconnect offers loans, grants, and loan grant combinations to build infrastructure and install equipment that provides modern, reliable, high-speed internet service in rural America. Eligible uses could be cost of construction, improvement, or acquisition of facilities and equipment needed to provide broadband service of delivering 100 meg symmetrical service. Next milestone, looks like estimated application opening date, third quarter 2022. So again, while USDA, I think it was the USDA Reconnect, there's a deadline of tomorrow for what's currently available, but again, coming in third quarter of this year, will be some additional money coming out through some new applications there. State Digital Equity Planning Grant, $60 million, not billion there. Recipients are states, territories, and DC. Promote digital inclusion and equity to ensure that all individuals and communities have skills, technology, and capacity needed to reap the full benefits of our digital economy, to promote the meaningful adoption of broadband. So this is aiming at the adoption question. So we can build infrastructure all day long. But as they say, you can, what is it? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it surf the web, right? So at least I said that. I don't know if anybody else has, but so you can build all of this broadband infrastructure, and then if somebody doesn't know how to use it, well, for one, if it's not affordable, then they can't afford it, they can't use it. But even if they can afford it through a subsidy program or through competitive pressures that bring prices down, if they don't know how to use it, they're still not going to be able to get benefit out of it. So that's the point of a program like this. So eligible uses would be planning and feasibility. It's interesting, it doesn't say promoting digital inclusion, but estimated application opening date, second quarter 2022, coming up. State Digital Equity Capacity Grants. So a lot of these digital equity grants say the same thing, it's just got a slightly different focus. So in this case, it's a Digital Equity Capacity Grant, approximately $1.4 billion. States, territories, and DC would be the eligible recipients. So it's distributed via annual grant programs over 5 years to implement digital equity projects and support the implementation of digital equity plans. Was this digital equity? That was a digital equity one too. That's right, I forgot. Yeah, these are, all of these say the same thing basically on the front end here as to what they're for, and then there's the specific thing that they're doing. So in this case, this was that's why it didn't mention the other thing. This is a planning grant, so that's why there's eligible uses for planning and feasibility. In this case, this is a capacity grant, and the eligible uses are planning again, and then broadband adoption, digital literacy, and tech support. Estimated application opening date also to be determined. And then there's the State Digital Equity Competitive Grant, about $1.25 billion. You can see all the recipients here. Again, it's state governments, but also lots of other stakeholders. Description on this one, again, says the same thing. It's all part of this $2.75 billion, but this is $1.25 billion discretionary grant program distributed via, I'm supposed to via annual grant programs over 5 years to implement digital equity projects. So in this case, the eligible uses broadband adoption, digital literacy, tech support, digital equity programs. So similar to the others. Again, TBD on when it's going to be released. We've got middle mile programs, $1 billion. Again, that's not very much, but some BEAD dollars can be used towards middle mile in areas that need it. You see your recipients here, states, counties, utilities, etc. Description, $1 billion program for the construction, improvement, or acquisition of middle mile infrastructure to reduce the cost of connecting unserved and underserved areas to the internet backbone. So that's one of the issues we have when we've got rural areas, these pockets out there that are unserved or underserved, and they're rural, and by virtue of that fact, a lot of times there's different rural communities that are far apart from each other. So how do they all get connected? Well, you need this middle mile infrastructure to get the to get the broadband out to these rural areas. So that's part of what this is supposed to take care of. And again, in certain states, that's worse than others. States like Alaska are going to need a lot of middle mile infrastructure, as well as other states that have lots of rural areas. Eligible uses, broadband infrastructure deployment and construction. Estimated application opening date on that one is second quarter 2022. Funding amount for this one, this is distance learning, telemedicine, and broadband program, broadband loans, $74 million approximately. It's interesting how little 74 million seems when you're talking about billions on all these other programs. That seems like just a pittance, 74 million. You can see your recipients here. This is loans and loan guarantees to finance construction, improvement, or acquisition of facilities and equipment needed to provide high-speed broadband service in eligible rural areas. Got your eligible uses. I won't go through all of these, but you can look through this document if you're interested in that one. Next milestone, estimated application opening date is also TBD. Then you got your affordable connectivity program. Again, this is a big one, 14.2 billion. Oh wait, I'm sorry. We already talked about that. This is outreach grants of affordable connectivity programs. So this is not really defined yet. You see the funding amounts TBD. Funding mechanism is kind of up in the air. It says the FCC may provide grants to outreach partners to educate consumers about the affordable connectivity program. So there's already a lot of people. There's like 10 million. Yeah, there's 10 million people signed up for the ACP already. So I don't think they're having a hard time getting the word out. So they may not do this, and they may save that money for something else. If there is money, they may need to, they don't know, I don't know where they're going to get the money. They may need to apply for it. So maybe this won't happen. Description to help inform and educate consumers. And then there's the broadband deployment locations map, easily $10 million. So this is what the FCC has been given. I believe this came from an earlier. I don't know if they got $10 million more through this latest infrastructure bill. Maybe they did, but I know they were funded to start working on this mapping before this bipartisan infrastructure law ever passed. But it says here $10 million to establish an online mapping tool to provide a locations overview of the overall geographic footprint of each broadband infrastructure deployment project. So maybe this is different. So this may be different from the broadband maps that are supposed to show who has broadband. So in the broadband maps that the FCC is working on, I bet this is different. You're supposed to be able to go in, type in your address or any address and say, is there broadband there? And then see who the providers are, what speeds they're offering, what latency is, lots of different information. So you can see who's served and underserved. That's the FCC is working on that. So this may be an additional 10 million to try to figure out which broadband programs are being, or which areas that are served and underserved are being handled by different broadband programs. So you've got mentions here, again, each broadband infrastructure deployment project, such as the Infrastructure Act, this one here, Coronavirus Aid, Relief and Economic Security Act, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA of 2021, and any other federal amounts appropriated or any federal programs authorized after the date of enactment of the Infrastructure Act to fund broadband infrastructure deployment. So this is good. I'm glad they're working on it. I didn't realize this was a separate bit here. So we've got all of this money. We've got ARPA. We've got USDA Reconnect. We've got RDOF. All of these programs are allocating money to unserved and underserved areas. So this needs to be figured out. Like, where is this money going, so we know where the IIJA or the Bead money, let's say the Bead money, needs to go from this act that is not even yet distributing money. So that's what that is, I believe. And this Denali Commission broadband funding, it's only $250,000. That's nothing. This is just states, counties, cities, townships. Program to assist rural Alaskan communities in planning and build out of modern broadband capabilities. So they're certainly going to need the help up there. And Alaska is a unusual area as our country goes, because it is huge, right? It's a huge amount of territory, very few people in it, relatively speaking, compared to the size of the territory, and very difficult terrain in a lot of the territory. Okay, mountainous, permafrost. And again, middle mile infrastructure is a challenge. Just last mile infrastructure is a challenge in places. So that's to help alleviate that. So there you go. I think that that is a good example of what we have there. And that, let's see, this is the, why is that got so small? I'll bring that back up. What we have available from the government as far as, making it easier for us to understand what is out there. Again, you can read the bill, but sometimes it helps to have that in a nice format there. So I've got Ross here has got a question. Why aren't cable operators enabling low latency DOCSIS? And is there any broadband funding to help with node splits and congestion? Well, the low latency DOCSIS, that's part of DOCSIS, I guess the 4.0 specification. So I don't know if that's fully baked yet, Ross. DOCSIS 4.0, they're moving toward that, and there's different aspects of that to help improve DOCSIS, to improve the speed. So you've got extended spectrum DOCSIS, where they're going to provide more spectrum in general, so you can go up higher on the upstream. They've got full duplex DOCSIS, so some are going full duplex to look at that's how they're going to improve speed. Some are going extended spectrum DOCSIS, looking at doing it that way. Some are just saying we're just going to go fiber to the curb. But then you've also got low latency DOCSIS, which is another aspect of this. So I don't know why yet they haven't started implementing that. I think it's probably related to the fact that I don't think, again, on things like low latency DOCSIS, I don't know that it's fully baked yet. They may still be trying to get everything in place as far as equipment goes. They'll be able to do that, and all of the, I think the specifications there, but that may be the reason. And no, I don't believe there's any broadband funding to help with node splits and congestion. So that's just something that cable operators are doing on their own. A lot of them have done that. When the pandemic hit, they noticed, wow, suddenly we've got all this upstream traffic that we didn't see before. Before that, a lot of it was downstream, and upstream was less of an issue, but then everybody was home doing things like I'm doing right now, doing Zoom calls, kids doing homework, parents doing Zoom calls, and then all the other things that are driving, more upstream traffic. So a lot of them started doing some of that node splitting. It was just something that they had to do, but there's not anything, as far as I know. Obviously cable operators can participate in all of the other broadband money, and I don't think there might not be a restriction, like let's say they get some money and they could apply it to node splits. I don't know. It's supposed to be for broadband deployment, new infrastructure in unserved areas. But if they're in an area and they're not able to provide, let's say, the minimum speeds of 25 by 3 or 100 by 20, then I suppose they could use the money to try to beef up their infrastructure to do that. So it would have to be that way. And you're welcome. Thanks for watching. So thanks for joining me. Appreciate your watching. Give me a thumbs up if this was helpful for you. And if you're not subscribed, click subscribe, click the little bell, and you'll be notified when I am live. So I will see you tomorrow with a new episode of Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.